course, our foreign correspondent based in Sanpo, Billy Urado, close friend of them, Mr. Miron. Lito Cardi po sa
yes, of course, yeah.
Willing Graphics. Of course, si Ma'am Chuchay.
Yes. Good morning, good morning.
Hi, Sir Easy Nichols po sa CNN, sir.
Yes, yes, yes.
Hi, sir.
Never mind you.
Aray.
Of course, Atty.
Thank you, sir, for being
Representing
here.
DW, Karambola Group.
Karambola.
Of course, J. Mark, DWIC.
Hello, good morning.
And of course, my daughter, then Sharon.
Yes, yes. Kasama, will you be asking me questions? So, doon ako hindi nyo na mahihirap na tanong.
Anyway, sir, permit me, tuloy po natin, very precious ang oras niyo. If you may permit me, may I ask you the first question? Baka maunahan pa nila eh. Regarding the very... Anyway, sir, how about this? What is your stand regarding the current situation regarding these unvaccinated persons, individuals? Will you be continuing the or mandating all those unvaccinated to be vaccinated? Considering that recently, sir, I hope you don't mind, Malaysian doctors presented documents to the Malaysian government requesting that the vaccination program of Malaysia be stopped. And I think last Friday I just read it CDC America na natural immunity is more okay than being vaccinated.
Well, ang balita ko is yung Omicron, I think the immunity does a better job ang nagkasakit at gumaling, mas magandang immunity kaysa sa nabakunahan. But nonetheless, we don't want anybody to get sick. Hindi naman siguro magandang solusyon yan. Although some people have said, yung mga unvaccinated, lagay mo lahat sa isang gym tapos maghawaan. Parang yung bata tayo, yung recess. But we cannot just allow our people to get sick. We have to do everything that we can. Palagay ko, the vaccination program must continue. Although you cannot force anybody to vaccinate. It's the same concept as pagka yung may sakit, nasa ospital, kahit sabihin ng doktor, di ka pa pwedeng umuwi, hindi ka pa dapat umuwi, they can check themselves out. So the same, in like fashion, you cannot force anyone to be vaccinated. But we still need to acquire the, what they call the herd immunity. And since the last number that I saw was 54 million Filipinos have been vaccinated, but that's less than maybe for the target demographic, that is still around 60%. So they talk about 70-75%. There is a hope that if the Omicron will provide the immunity, baka umabot na tayo dun sa herd immunity. But look at the advantages of being vaccinated. In other countries, like in the UK, in Europe, in Spain, in Italy, and I've spoken to friends of mine who live there, mga Pinoy, sinasabi nila, doon, kahit na ma-positive ka sa Omicron, hindi nila pinapansin. They don't wear masks, they go to work, wala na. And they say, kung nilagdating ka, di mag-paracetamol ka. Hindi mo na kaya, just stay home and magpagaling ka. And that's because they have 95% vaccination. So that would be a good place to be, I think, for the Philippines. So the vaccination still has its place. It's a little bit parang very bitter pill to swallow. Yung sasabihin natin na may amo sila pagkasakit, hindi naman natin pwedeng gawin yun. So tuloy pa rin natin yung vaccination.
Sa follow-up lang po, will the no vax, no right continue? In your
Ako, in principle, I agree.
Yes.
Because kung talagang ayaw magpa-vaccinate yung tao, hindi mo nga mapipilit. Pero you have to think of the safety ng mga kasama niya doon sa public transport. So, the no box, no ride, in principle, it's okay. In practice, it doesn't work. Ilang araw na tayo nag no box, no ride, pati pulis, hindi alam kung ano yung dokumento na hanapin. Yung conductor, ang gulo-gulo. It doesn't really work. So, I don't know what we have to come up with something different. Maybe, I was thinking, maybe it will be like there's some parts of the world, yung trend pambabae lang kasi di ba meron silang minumolesta sila dun sa mga trend na ano. So puro babae lang. So bakit ba gawin natin kung talaga ayaw yung papavaccinate, kung mag-volunteer yung driver, yung conductor, o yun po yung lahat ng hindi magpapavaccinate, dito na kayo. Dito na kayo sa bus na ito para hindi naman mapigil yung trabaho nila. Because right now, to a Filipino, work is more important than COVID. Because sasabihin nga nila, ang dami, how many times you members of the press, I'm sure you've heard this many times, na sinasabihan ng tao, huwag kayong lalabas, huwag kayong mag-iingat kayo. Hindi na baling magkasakit, basta't makatrabaho ako ng konti, wala na ako ipakain wala na ako yung pambayad So whatever, hindi na bali, I'll take the risk. So we are at that point, so we cannot, hindi na tayo pwedeng mag-lockdown, hindi na natin pwedeng pigilan. We have to get people back to work. Otherwise, baka masyado nang malalim itong butas na hindi na tayo makalabas ulit. So, yes, in principle, but we have to do a better job. Because I see the reports. Ang gulo-gulo because the required documentation, nakita nyo ba yung listahan ng dokumento na kailangan i-present para sumakay ka ng bus? Hindi naman yung pati yung driver, yung conductor, hindi naman sila trained sa ganyan At saka hindi maliwanag ang instruction sa atin kung ano yung mga dokumentong dapat ipakita pabago-bago. And it is also very hard, even for the vaccinated, to know that we have to carry this document, this vaccination card, this negative result, kung ano-anong hinahanap. So, and then the exemptions. The exemptions are the ones that are making it difficult. Because now you have to show that you're an essential worker, that you're maybe... Marami, it's too complicated. It doesn't work on the ground. You have to find something else.
Ano po mensahe nyo kay Atty. Acosta?
Well, see, I think that I think we are in an emergency situation. So tama rin si Percy that she's saying that na hindi that we should not how do you say, we should not show a prejudice against a certain group of people. And I think that her concern is correct. But there is also the issue of public safety. These are the balances that the COVID has brought into our lives. That we have to, a rock and a hard place lagi tayo We're always been between a rock and a hard place. We have to make those, and I think we just have to look at the present situation, what the vaccination rates have been, what is the infection rate, what are the actual effects of Omicron? Are they severe? May namamatay ba? We were all hoping that itong Omicron, wala namang namamatay. Baka okay lang magkasakit para magka-immunity na. Pero meron na rin namamatay. So, I don't know. Is this as they say in the military, acceptable rate of casualty for us? Again, these are the kind of bitter and difficult decisions that COVID has brought into our lives. So those assessments will have to be made by the doctors, will have to be made by our best research based on the best science that we can find, and the situation at that time. Is the spread rapid? Is it like they say in NCR is coming down? Slowly decreasing. So we have to adjust. We have to adjust all the time, and we have to base it always on our best information on what is going on out in the field, out in the public domain kung ano ba talaga nangyayari. Is it getting worse? Is it getting better? What is it that we can do? Itong mga kaya ngayon no box no ride, is it practical? For one, it's hard to enforce. So these are the difficult decisions we continuously have to make. We are making those changes almost every day now. So yes, yeah, that's my view on this difficult situation.
Alam ko namin, Mr. President, this is your first major problem you'll be encountering once you're in the position. Next question, please. Okay, Mr. Chay.
Sir, binanggit mo na, we have to get people back to work kasi sabi nyo, hindi natin alam, masyadong lumalalim na yung balon. One of the forced realities forced on us by the pandemic is that we have had to fund our pandemic response with a lot of loans. So, some experts are saying there's a feared debt bomb after the Duterte administration. In your case, how do you plan to handle this? What sort of fiscal management strategy are you?
Well, let's look first at our actual situation. If we look at as a percentage of GDP, we're running our borrowings are running at about 50 plus percent, 60% more or less. And if you compare this with other countries, we're actually doing a much better job than they are, because I know other countries that are approaching 100. I know of one African country that is at 120%. But that doesn't change the situation that you have such a lot of borrowings here. What we will have to do is essentially none of this can be solved until we get people back to work, until we revitalize the economy. And that's why it has to be very much a targeted in terms of public investment. I do not think that if we continue to just allow the free market to decide how we go, I don't think that that's going to be workable. That will not improve our debt position. What we really have to do is to target certain areas of the economy, certain sectors of the economy, and the public. We have to put in public investment into that. Now we are already in debt, so how do we arrange funding for that? And I believe the partnership between private and public sector is going to be critical. That's actually one of the best solutions that we have. A good partnership between, especially the capital-intensive businesses, the investments, not only local, not only foreign. We always talk about foreign, may local din. Oh, we have to look at the local for now to begin with. Maybe pagka medyo the global economy starts to open up, then we can go back. We can go back to those partners in the economic partners that we've had to give us assistance. And I think that will be available. That might be available, although everybody else is in a similar situation as we are. So the private, maybe the private savings and investment that from other countries, if they're in a better position, they can help fund the public part, PPPs. The trouble with a very close relationship between an interventionist economic policy and a close partnership with the private sector is sometimes ang naiipit is the labor segment. So we have to watch out for that. Na hindi naman maiwanan ng labor segment where inflation, there's no cost of living adjustment. We have to look out for that. But that is something that we know can be a side effect if we are not careful, by saying that labor plays an important part, of course, in the economy, even as consumers, and therefore we have to still encourage that labor is in a good position, or at least is attended to by the policies of the government.
In trying to revitalize the economy, sir, I remember that when you were you had a program of tourism where you opened houses there for tourists, halimbawa, Italy, kita na taga-Italia yung and consistent with that, I also ask, how do you intend to solve the energy insufficiency problem that we have? And I understand you have the wind farm in,
Yes.
how do you intend to come up with these two big projects that could possibly revitalize the town?
The two are being energy and
Tourism.
well, tourism is one of the things that I think in the immediate, in the short term, let's say, is something that we can encourage because we have a very ganda-ganda ng Pilipinas, and the Filipinos are very hospitable and gracious, and mahal tayo ng buong mundo, so people will want to come. So I think tourism is one of those. I said we have to have a targeted investment approach for public investment, and I think tourism is going to be one of those areas that immediately, because if you notice, remember, nung medyo gumagaang na yung COVID, medyo bumababa na, at nagbukas na yung mga tourism areas, nagpuntahan kagad ng tao, nagdagsaan kagad ng tao. So the domestic tourism can take the load until foreign travel or international travel can become more rationalized, can go back to the levels, pre-COVID levels. So for me, it's an important short-term, not short-term, but immediate solution. It will go into the long term because it's a good industry, it's an important industry for us. So, but now what we have to do now, if we're going to talk about international tourism, ang airport natin, hanggang 6.5 million a year lang talaga yung the capacity to receive international travelers. So it's time to look at, again, we go back to infra. Look at the airports around in those places that have tourism destinations. Look at the infrastructure. Simple things like the road going back and forth, the lighting, yun ang mga na-experience namin sa Ilocos was these are just simple things that we need to put in place. But they are not difficult. So let's already start, siguro by now, on infra development on the areas that we feel are going to be important for the tourism industry. And one of the most unfortunate recent developments was Odette. Ang dinaanan ng Odette, lahat ng tourism areas and this was going to be the coming out Christmas for the tourism industry. Siargao was completely fully booked. Bohol was completely fully booked. Palawan completely fully booked. Tapos ito Cebu. Tapos doon na nitong Odette. So we have to come back from that. Wala tayong magagawa. Nangyari. So tourism is definitely going to be a very important part of that. Now, as to the second sector, the energy sector, that is a much more complicated situation. We are also trying to develop our energy supply in the context of increasing concern over global warming. And the COP29 that they had in Edinburgh was anyway in Scotland. They had the countries around the world decided we will cut down on coal. What happened when we canceled all the coal? Nagkulang, tumaas ang presyo ng kuryente because hindi pa ma-replace ng renewables. So the supply shrank and the prices went up. So we have to be more careful in none of these sudden moves that we have been seeing. What we need to do is decide for the Philippines if we are going to play a part in global to combat global warming, what the mix should be between renewables and traditional. And although we are, of course, in the Ilocos Norte, great proponents of renewables because of the wind, we started with the wind farm, we are now developing solar. There is still a recognition that there's a base load that we have to attend to, which needs to be supplied by traditional forms of power generation. Now we can also expand and develop our geothermal, our hydro, electric. We can the solar power has become more viable. In fact, I think when it comes to when you crunch the numbers, I think it is now better than wind farms because the efficiency of the technology has increased, the price of the capital expenditure for that has decreased. So it's become more viable, and it's perfect for the Philippines because windmills need to be in a very particular kind of wind situation. Kaya Ilocos, swerte kami. Pwede kami mag-windmill. There are other places na pwede mag-windmill, but there are other places na hindi dahil malakas ang hangin, sasabihin malakas ang hangin dito, hindi ganun. It has, there are some technical requirements so that it will be viable for wind farm. However, solar in the Philippines, anywhere you bring solar, it's going to be viable. So that's something that we need to develop. However, to go back to that other point that we have to take the base load, we still need to have traditional sources of power. And of course, the oil-fired, coal-fired, binabawas pa rin natin, but there are new technologies actually that I've been to China, and I've been to a coal-fired power plant. It was 200 yards from a school, and there was no pollution. So baka pwede nating i-adapt yun. But we still have to continuously look at oil-fired and that very pinag-uusapan nuclear. Because right now, actually, if run properly, nuclear is a better, cleaner way of producing power than the traditional oil-fired, coal-fired plants. So that's something we have to look at now again. But let us look at they talk about the rehabilitation and the possible start-up of the Bataan nuclear power plant. I think it should be examined properly because the experience of other countries still brings them back to nuclear. France is eventually going to. They were at some point in the 60% already. Talaga majority na. America continues to build nuclear plants. Japan, the same thing, because wala silang oil. So maybe we should look into it in a serious way. But let us do it and let's follow the science. We all know naman what happened in 1986. The nuclear power plant became a political issue. It's the only reason why it doesn't run now. The sister plants in Korea, ironically called Cory 1, Cory 2, Cory 3, and Cory 4 and Cory 5. The sister plants that were built by Westinghouse in Korea have done so well that pinadami nila. Nag-umpisa lang isa lang yung Cory 1 tapos sinundang agad ang Cory 2, 3, 4. Ngayon nag-iisip pa na naman sila ng isa pa. And these are the sister plants of the Bataan nuclear power plant. In fact, Korea has already made an offer to come and inspect our nuclear power plant and see what can be done. So let us examine that and with an objective eye. Huwag na natin gawin pang-politika. Follow the science. Like in anything, let's follow the science and see. Let's crunch the numbers. Is it still feasible? Is it still a valid option? Or if not, do we have? Unfortunately, right now, at least yung nagat ng two, it became a political appointment. The governor, the city mayor, will be the one to say it. Ito na ilagay, pag nawala yung board member, o ito yung palit natin, sila magsasabi. Then they just, I guess, ratify it by the General Assembly. But that was not the actual cooperatives were formed to assist their rural electrification program, which has run its course. Maraming talaga tayong pinaabot ng electrical na kuryente kahit yung mga malalayo. We built submarine cables, we laid submarine cables and things like that. Now, there are new technologies. Instead of laying submarine cable, maybe we can get a source of power within a small island. Diba? Then the new battery technology is actually becoming practical. we are lucky that the Philippines has a lot of nickel and we have sources of lithium. So maybe we can even make those batteries here. So there are many opportunities, but it is not a small problem. And it is something that we have to look at and find a solution for if the economy is going to grow beyond pre-COVID levels. So if we are going to hope for positive growth, we need to attend to the power problem.
Sir, my question is about freedom of information. For President Duterte, sir, has received criticism for not making public the statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth, or yung SAL. Sir, kayo, when you're in Malacanang now, what's your stand going to be on this? Are you going to make your SAL public, sir, or will you order the ombudsman to remove the recent restrictions, sir, on making public or yung pag-request ng public sa mga SAL-N po ng government officials?
Well, it depends what the purposes are for making them public. If the purpose is going to be political attack, then why do we want to do that? You know, the prospect of Chief Justice Corona being impeached on the basis, and I saw every single piece of evidence in the Corona impeachment case, and they based it on his salary, but it was not. It really, if you look at it even more closely, it was a political decision. It was not an objective decision or objective judgment on what he had done. But so if that is going to be the purpose for it, some political agenda, then I don't see the reason why the salary should be given. If maybe the salary should be, if there is a case filed, perhaps that's the time that we that can be given, but maybe not to the public, but certainly to the agents of the agents in the court, or the court itself, whatever that court might be. I think that might be a good, workable partial solution. Because kung lahat ng politiko may kalaban makakahanap yan, gagawa ng issue kahit na walang issue. And my prime example is Corona. Walang issue gumawa sila, tinanggal siya but there was not really they manipulated the analysis of his salary to make it look like he was hiding something. And anyone who has any background in business will have understood that that was not the case.
Okay. Sir, quick follow-up. So, pati sa media, sir, pati kami, kasi recently we don't have access. Before we used to, nakakapag-request kami. But in recent years, yung huli nang nakita namin kay Pangulong Duterte was 2018. So you think, sir, justified naman yung ganong restriction sa ombudsman? Even for media?
Yes.
Ganun din Sir, kasi yung senator...
Kasi, halimbawa, sasabihin natin, the media, let's say the media has inquiry o nabigay sa media, ito na-publicize, kahit na hindi media ang gagawa, ako yung kalaban ko yung pinalabas ko yung salary, magagawa ako ng kwento dyan. And that just gets in the way of everything. Then we have to go through all of this, which is absolutely unnecessary. Maybe my experience with the Corona impeachment has a lot to do with it. It really does. Because they made something out of nothing.
Pero sa Senate, di ba, par for the portion, kayo, you were a former senator. Lahat ng senators every year naglalabas.
Yeah, because for us, for senators, wala naman kaming ninalo, so we show the salary. But I think we have to be more protective. You know, the salary is actually it shows exactly what your economic activity has been pretty much for all your life. And to be fair, some of the, like this is another thing we discovered, like in terms of yung ginawa niya ng problema in terms of land valuation. Halimbawa, sinabi niya yung land valuation, there's three kinds. There's the one of the local, there's one of the market, there's one, all of this, ginawan siya ng kwento. So it's not also clear. My salad includes all three, always, para maingat, lessons learned, di ba? But not everybody does that. So I do not, if it is going to be used to victimize the person who put up their salad, then I don't see why we will do that, because we're going to be mired again in some political morass that will just stop the work that we are doing, instead of just getting on with it. Now, if there is a serious complaint about the salad being inaccurate, then maybe we can take it to the ombudsman. We can take it, and they can examine. We can take it to AMLAC. Maybe they can examine. Even the changes in the banking secrecy. That's a sagaban na naman sa investment. Yeah, we almost opened up even foreign indexed bank accounts, which by law has really been kept private, kept privileged. So we have to look at it very well. And pag gagamitin lang sa politika, wag na lang. Ganun na lang, let's keep it simple. Kung ipupolitika lang, wag na lang. Huwag na ilabas yung salin. Kung talagang may kaso, kung talagang may problema, kung may reklamo, padaan natin sa ating mga authorities at silang magtingin, silang tumingin. Look at the central bank which has all of these records anyway. AMLAC has all of these records anyway. AMLA has all of these records anyway. If you take it to court, then the court will be allowed to look at all of the salad and examine it properly.
Pero hindi publicly, sir, yung ilalabas mo for everyone to, like yung ginagawa ni VP Lenny ngayon.
You give me somebody's salad which is perfectly good, mahahanapan ko ng ano yan. Mahahanapan ko ng issue yan kung talagang gusto ko. Pero ilan na lang bang gagawin natin?
Ma'am Chucha, I agree kay President BBM. I'm sorry. For your information po, very close rin po kami kay Gas Corona.
Oo nga.
Nakita namin pang ating ginawa dyan.
Oo. Talagang hindi na tama eh. Kaya kung ganun lang ang gagawin, is for political purposes, huwag na. Kung talagang may problema, if they violated or they neglected in some way what they were supposed to do, then we can take it to the proper authorities. Publicizing it will not help.
Okay.
Next. Yeah, ladies first.
Thank you, sir. Good morning po. This is about yung reimposition of death penalty. May iba naman ang tanong, sir. Few years ago, reimposition of death penalty. Few years ago, sir, nagsabi kayo na you're in favor of reimposition of death penalty sa drug traffickers. Yung stand nyo ba, sir, na yun hanggang ngayon yung pa rin?
Well, the death penalty should only be used, I believe, pagka talagang sinasabi that wala nang pag-asa yung tao, that talagang they will be of no, it cannot be rehabilitated, it's of no use to society and will continue to commit crimes. Maybe that's the time to impose the death penalty. Society may, in my view, should be able to make a determination if that person should continue to be a member of the society or not. If ilan ang pinatay, ilan ang sinaktan, ilan ang gano'n, at saka walang pag-asa naman bago, maybe the death penalty can be imposed. But I think all studies, legal and other and social, have shown that death penalty it does not change the patterns of crime. Because if somebody is going to kill somebody, hindi niya iisipin, hindi ko na lang papatayin kasi baka ma-death penalty ako. Papatayin pa rin niya yung tao. So it does not dissuade criminals from committing the crimes. But maybe if society determines that they can no longer be part of society and present a danger, a clear and present danger to society, then we can impose that penalty.
Okay, sir. We all know na millions of Filipino overseas are really now hoping for the best for the future. That's why a lot of them are now campaigning for you. What do you have plans for us Filipinos abroad? Ano po ba ang pwedeng i-offer ng gobyerno nyo sa mga Filipinos, not only from abroad, but yung mga kamag-anak nila dito?
Well, the first step has already been taken by the establishment, or at least the passage of the law to establish the Department of Migrant Workers. And in essence, the way it should be organized, in my view, the way it should be organized is that if you look at the experience that we have had, OFWs, when they get into trouble for whatever reason, when they are abroad, they go to the embassy, nagpapatulong. Binubugbog ako ng amo ko, ayaw ibigay yung passport ko, yung sweldo ko, whatever. Or namatayan kami, we have to send them home. Yan ang problema ng mga OFW. Ngayon, pagpunta nila sa DFA, ang DFA walang budget para dyan. So, tatawag sila sa DOLE, tatawag sa DOJ, tatawag sa ibang kung sino man makatulong. Sometimes NGOs are the ones who fill the gap. So, now that we will have the Department on Migrant Workers, I think that will institutionalize that kind of activity para pagtulong sa mga OFW. And that will be a very, very important development because may sarili na siyang pondo, may sarili na silang tao, wala na silang ibang ginagawa kung hindi tinutulungan ng OFW. So kung meron tayong military attaché sa bawat embassy, maglagay tayong labor, meron na tayong labor attaché. Pero yung labor attaché galing na ngayon sa bagong department. And meron siyang mapupuntahan, doesn't have to go around the different departments like the DFA does with their begging bowl, hoping that they will help somehow. Meron na siyang sariling may sistema, paano gagawin, where to get funding, etc., etc. Now that's for the OFWs who are already in trouble. I propose also that we go back to the old system. Na pag umuwi yung OFW, pag natapos na ang kontrata, that there will be a program of retraining especially for those that are come home and are hoping to go back para sa bagong kontrata. That is the old system before, but with an eye to looking at the labor market, the international labor market. Saan ba ngayon ang daming construction? Saan ba ngayon naghahanap ng nurse? Tsaka doktor? Saan ba ngayon where we can export? And we should, the retraining has to be relevant to the market. So, marami tayong ginagawa, livelihood, tapos at the end of the livelihood, wala namang trabaho pa rin. So it has to be with an eye to the market. I think that's an important thing. We have to find now the ones, the OFWs that have been brought back here, we have what, 700,000 na repatriate. Kailangan natin silang hanapan ng trabaho. Kaya ang mga ng Pilipinas yan, hindi mo ng trabaho. So, how do we do that? We have to find them jobs here. But I see, as the global economy starts to re-emerge, I think some diplomatic efforts on our part will help, because that's what we did to start the OFW trend anyway in the mid-70s. Pinapitan natin ng G2G tayo. At kinausap natin ng mga gobyerno. Sabi na, you have a big, you need engineers, you need construction workers, you need welders, marami kami niyan. So, why not sign a contract with us? O yung mga nawalan ng trabaho, yung sa na-repatriate, kasi nawalan ng trabaho, kung saan sila nanggaling, puntahan natin ulit. Let's go back to Dubai, let's go back to UAE, let's go back to Saudi. And say, okay, nagka-problema tayo dahil dito sa pandemic, paano natin ibabalik ngayon yan? Ibalik naman natin kasi kawawa itong mga tao ito. At saka may experience na kayo sa Pilipino. Nagustuhan nyo na yung Pilipino. We have a very good reputation as a good workforce. So, but we have to do some diplomatic engagements and return to that, because that's how we started.
Yes.
So let's do it again, because we are in a way starting again. There was one, I was talking to an OFW group the other day, and they brought up a very, very important point. Dahil nabanggit mo, yung mga pamilya, mag-isip tayo ng pabahay para sa mga pamilya. Kasi uuwi yan, tapos wala pa rin bahay, naka-squatter pa rin sila. Di ba? Mga engineer ito, ha? Hindi ito yung sa, medyo mid-level na ano to. Hindi, wala pa rin pabahay. It is part of a bigger problem that we have in the Philippines in terms of housing. I know this because I was chairman of the Committee on Housing and Urban Development in the Senate. We are approaching 5+ million shortage of housing for the general public. So that's another problem that we really have to look at. Ang daming problema talaga. That's another problem that we have to look at. Mabuti yan lang na mag-create na naman tayo ng Department of Human Settlements. So we again, at least institutionally and structurally, we are beginning to take the first steps to remedy the situation. But really the problem that I've been seeing, hindi pina-prioritize ng gobyerno. So hindi nabibigyan ng gastos, hindi nabibigyan ng pondo, hindi ginagastusan ng gobyerno, hindi naging priority. But it should be a priority because there are lots of social detrimental social effects to the Filipino family, lalo na pag mga OFW, hirap na nga, they're already separated, wala pa silang bahay. And we keep talking about how they are the bagong bayani, but we don't do anything. We don't do anything to actually help them, considering that the remittances constitute what, 11% of our GDP. Inalanin talaga natin, and at least it's not enough that we welcome them in the airport and shake their hands and take a picture. We have to really give something substantial back for what they have done for our country. And there were times in our economy, yan ang bumubuhay talaga sa atin, yan ang liquidity natin, it was coming from the remittances. So, yes, there are many problems facing, but maybe it would not be a bad thing to make them a priority. Everybody is a priority, but the OFWs, because of their contribution to our economy, should be recognized maybe as a special case. I don't know how we will do that as yet, because the demand or the lack of housing at home, without considering yet the OFW situation, is already a very, very bad one. So marami pa tayong hakabulin before we can get to the point na mamimili na tayo kung saan tayo magpapamahay. Especially in the urban areas. We have to change. I don't know pa dapat pa tayo sa housing, but anyway. But anyway, we have to look in the urban areas. We have to stop yung sinasabi bahay lupa. Yun ang talagang pangako ng gobyerno ba, may bibigyan kayo ng bahay lupa. Pag-isipan na natin yung high-rise, yung mga because wala nang lupa, wala na talagang mga lupa. Ituloy natin yung bliss. Imbes na mid-rise, high-rise na.
High-rise.
Oo, pero they own the unit.
Yes.
They own the unit. Pag-ibig is still functioning. As long as it's run properly, pag-ibig is still functioning, magagamit pa rin yung pera yan. So, again, that's something that we really need to look into to find a way. But in the end, ang situation sa housing, kailangan ng pondohan. Kailangan ng pondohan. Especially now that we have gone beyond the simplistic concept, just build a house. Hindi, you cannot just build a house. Kaya human settlements yan hindi titirahan yan kung walang eskwelahan para sa mga bata, kung walang palengke, kung walang transportation, di ba? Walang sakayan at babaan. If it's too far from the place of work, dapat the actual calculation, especially in urban areas, is 1 hour. Is the acceptable. How many people do we see in EDSA at 12 o'clock in midnight nag-aantay pa ng bus. Gigising ka ng 4 o'clock para makabalik. So talagang hindi, it's not, and you look at the people in the buses, tulog lahat. They're all asleep. Because syempre gumising na napakaaga, at nakatulog yan, late na. Di ba? So we have to keep that, we have to keep the travel time to go to work to within 1 hour. Which brings us to public transport. Kabit-kabit lang talaga. It's all very well. We live in a complicated economic system. So everything is complementary or becomes an obstacle to another part of the economy.
Sir, in relation sa BLIS, itutuloy niyo po ba yung program niyo na kaliwa?
Iba sa agri naman yun. Oo, sa agri naman yun. Well, agri, when you're talking about job generation, agri is going to be a key element. Because one of the sectors of society that bring most jobs for bang for buck in terms of public investment, agriculture is one of the best places. Because simply, when you talk about agri, people generally think about a farmer planting palay. But that's not what agri is about. Agri is not only about crops, it is also about livestock, it is also about fisheries. And if we are going to properly fix our agricultural sector, which by the way napabayaan ito for so many, the last time we heard the President talk about agri was at Karapat. And Arab was talking about Nakalapaw, which was not a bad idea, but you see that there's no priority to that. But we have to fix the entire system ending in the kaliwa. But you have to do research and development. Global warming na nga eh. I was looking out my window 2 weeks ago, bumubunga na yung mangga. Sabi ko, na-confuse pati yung kahoy. Kasi ang aga-aga, Enero pa, may mangga na. So we have to think about even the part that we play in global warming. That global warming place. We have to find new varieties. We have to find new techniques on how to grow, how to mag-alaga ng hayop at saka yung ating fisheries. To do that will require along an entire supply chain. You have to vertically integrate the entire system. And to vertically integrate requires financing, requires R&D, requires financing. After financing will be the acquisition of inputs for the farmers that we will give as part of the production loan, and then the processing. First we have to think about the mechanization of our farms, because if we look at the the countries that we can compare ourselves to, Vietnam and Thailand, the cost of production, the labor element of the cost of production in Vietnam and in Thailand is 1/2 of that in the Philippines, because we haven't mechanized. And one of the things, the reason that we haven't mechanized is that our holdings are relatively small. In Ilocos, it's 0.6 hectares per farmer. So, paano ka mag-large scale? Which brings us to cooperatives. May kailangan tayo mag-cooperative development. But anyway, we have to do all of that so that meron tayong FTI noon, bagsakan, that is going to be the wholesale bagsakan ng agricultural products. And then, ibebenta siya, ipagbibili sa kaliwa. Now, presumably, because government is not a profit-oriented enterprise, it can be sold for cheaper, which is why Kadiwa was actually a success at nakapag-provide na ng cheap areas. Now, we need to do this anyway, because one of the first things that we noticed when COVID came was our food supply suddenly became precarious. Yeah, and that included not only because of the production, but it also included the supply lines, that everything was cut off, restaurants were closed, so the farmers were stuck. Kahit na maganda yung ani nila, wala silang pupuntahan yung kanilang ani. So we have to fix all that. These are the things. But if we have that agricultural system together, like nasimula niyan na masagana 99. But then, sinabayan din pati fisheries, di ba? Nagbigay ng yung out of KKK, nagbigay yung gobyerno ng pangka, nagbigay ng mga ng nets, nagbigay ng mga outboard motors, all of these things for that. Now, I think as far as I can tell, our inland fisheries are already fully developed. But maybe mariculture might be the next. We are archipelagic country. There is so much opportunity for mariculture. There's a statistic that says by 2035, 50% of the consumption of fish from the sea will be cultivated. We have to get in there. Bagay na bagay sa atin yan eh. So we have to start that already. And then the programs that we always had, yung para sa livestock na nagbibigay ng inahin, ng baka, ng baboy, ng kambing, di ba, dinidistribute sa tao yan pagka nanganak na, kukunin ulit yung inahin, dadalhin sa next para magkaroon ulit ng ano. So, yun ang dispersal, yung tinatawag nilang dispersal. So those are the things that we still have to do. And then, ang ending nga niya, pag marami na tayong produkto, maganda na yung produkto ng isda, maganda ng production ng isda, maganda ang production natin sa livestock, at at that time, rice and corn lang. Pero isama na natin sa high value crops, sa mga gulay, then we can sell it in the kadiwa. So yes, the kadiwa. Actually, yung kadiwa, kahit na hindi pa natin ginagawa, binubuhay na talaga eh. Many local governments have adopted it already. So we can go back, look at the model that we had before, change it, adjust it to the modern situation, to today's situation, and that way we can have again a robust food supply, that we don't have to worry that there's a pandemic, mawawala yung food supply. Kung mag-alitan ang Thailand at saka Pilipinas, hindi tayo umaasa. Di ba? Baka magka-problema. May OFW na nagka-problema. There's going to be a diplomacy. Like in China, di ba, tinigil yung pagpapasok ng ano. So, all of these things, I think, can be done. But it's not the work of a day. Because we're not talking about one here and two there. We're talking about whole systems. So, what I hope to do, should I be blessed to be put in the position of president, then I think what we can only 6 years is we heard President Duterte. Sabi niya, talagang hindi kasa sa 6 na taon, hindi ko lang nagawa lahat ng gusto kong gawin. So at least masimulan lang, we institutionalize some of these efforts that we have, so that kahit magpalit na ng administrasyon, ay tuloy pa rin yung ganung klaseng system. Kabit talaga lahat. You cannot talk about one without talking about the others. It just doesn't work.
Okay. You're inheriting a military that is a lot less politicized now than in previous administrations. Because we've begun our program. There are more Black Hawks coming, and they're primarily for civil defense. In effect, you're inheriting a happy military. Except, when it comes to foreign policy, we have had the image of a Secretary of National Defense going tit for tat with the Chinese ambassador. So, what are your plans so that we have a more, stable foreign policy, as well as how do we keep our military happy with regard to that particular instance?
Well, I think if when you cannot avoid, when you talk about foreign policy for the Philippines, talking about China and the United States.
Yes.
And our place between those two superpowers, especially in the region. So, what we must immediately understand, or at least in my view, is that we are not going to go to war with China. There's just no reason for us to do that, and it will not get us anything except death and destruction, which is something that neither China nor the Philippines wants. So we should gear our military, as you say, to civil defense and internal threats. And I think diplomacy is what we will use to mitigate or to lessen external threats. So, if you're going to talk about China, the foreign policy, I think there needs to continue to be engagement. As I always explain, there are three ways to gain or lose territory. In one is by decisions of the some arbitration that are agreed upon by the parties. The other one is war, which is one thing that should not even be considered as an option for the Philippine-China relationship. And the third is bilateral agreement, and that's what we're left with. What we're left with is bilateral agreement. So we need to continue to engage with China. But we are doing this in the context now, geopolitical context of the maneuverings between China and the United States. And we are in a particular position because we have a very strong, solid, special relationship with the United States. Who are now at loggerheads with the Chinese, with whom we also have a very good relationship since 1975. So that's the balance that the Philippines has to find. We are, in a sense, we are very lucky because our geographic position puts us in a very strategic area. But we are unlucky because now we are in the middle of this how do you say this struggle for dominance between China and the United States, at least in this region. But I think we have to be, if you're talking about consistency, we must continue to engage all parties. We must remove ourselves from the old thinking of the Cold War, wherein the so-called spheres of influence dictate the foreign policy of each country, where each country is saying, I'm with the Soviet Union, the other will say, I'm with the United States. We now have to think in terms of the Philippines, and the interests of the United States and China should be secondary to the interests of the Philippines. And we must always remind ourselves, we do not work for Washington, D.C., we do not work for Beijing, we work for the Philippines. But again, it is not an easy, because we are in a it's a very, very thin line, very fine line that we have to walk to make sure that this balanced foreign policy that with the big forces of the United States and China that are bearing down all around us, has to be, we have to, and it's not always the same. It changes from time to time. So we have to navigate that. Our ASEAN partners, I think, are going to be a very, very important part of that effort. Our partners in Japan, our partners in Australia, those are going to be. Then of course the ASEAN are going to be. It's going to be very, very important. The foreign policy. This is the first national election I've seen where foreign policy actually became an issue. And the issue is, why do you not let our fishermen fish where they have fished for more than 100 years? And maybe that's where we start, talking to China. You know, I don't think that they can consider the Bangkas coming to within a mile or so of the claimed area. I don't think they can consider that as a military threat. So we can perhaps pursue that. We have to engage all, not only China, not only the United States, but all our partners, even malayo na nga ang EU, pero they still have a say in geopolitics. But again, I think that the part that ASEAN will play is going to be very, very important. Kasi syempre pagka collegial body na kagaya ng ASEAN, it has a more powerful voice than if it's just the Philippines talking. But we have so many common interests within ASEAN that I think that we will be able to engage those common interests or cite those common interests so that we move in the same direction with ASEAN.
You mentioned the EU. Currently, Joma season apparently does not have any, how do you call it? He is not under any, he has not gotten asylum. He has applied for asylum, but the Netherlands government, of course, as per treaty, si Joma season, sir.
Oh, yes.
So he's still in the Netherlands. He lost his appeal with the EU to be granted asylum. But he's now in that gray area of waiting for that decision. Do we have any policy on making him come home and face charges?
Well, that's not really our concern. It's the Netherlands who will decide that. Of course, any citizen will be welcome back to the Philippines should they be deported or be asked to lose their status as migrants or again for political asylum.
But even as he still seems to have some sway with the local communist insurgency, we'll just let the Netherlands decide whether or not to get him. Because he does.
Then we get into
keep
what
making
the
statements.
evolution now of the CPP-NPA, the Communist Party, has changed its nature since Joma season left the Philippines. So I do not know what place he will then occupy within the CPP-NPA. Should he have to come back? Of course, if he takes up arms once again against the state, then the state will have to defend itself. So we will we will have to watch very closely what the Netherlands decides to do.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, as mentioned ni Chuchay regarding yung mamanahin ng next administration about issues on financing. Now, plus that by next year, by this year, ito rin yung start ng Mandana's local implementation. So, ang tanong sir, yung national government at saka local government, dapat align na yung projects nila na hindi naasahan lang ng local government yung national government because they are given down the fund. So, ang question sir, ano magiging composition or itsura ng economic team na tinitignan ninyo? Because right now, hindi lang foreign yung issues or international issues, but even yung local management ng budget will be involved. So, ano magiging parang composition or idea ninyo about the economic team under your administration?
Well, that's a matter of great concern, because we're moving 256 billion or whatever the number is from one part of the economy to another part of the economy. And you're absolutely correct that there has to be a synergy, ideally, between what the national government does and what the local government does, with especially local government receiving this additional given share. Right now, it's not yet clear what will be what ang inaalala ng local government ngayon is that there are going to be so many functions that will be removed, that will be minimized, I suppose, or downgraded in the national government at ililipat na yon sa local government. What those are, hindi pa maliwanag. It hasn't come out yet. But definitely, I think, if we are going to put that money to good use, I'm not saying that local governments don't know how to use the money. I'm saying that they all have different agendas. And those agendas may not necessarily align with what the agenda of the national government is. Now, we were talking about the revitalization of the economy after COVID. We will have to have a very focused public investment, and that will not be a lot. That will not happen if local government is doing their own plan, not following the national agenda. So we still, before we impose these additional functions on the local governments, we have to have a plan, a national plan, and say, look, everybody, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to achieve these certain things, and we're trying to develop these certain segments of our economy. We're trying to develop not only the economic side, but the social side, all of these things, the yung mga ginagawa natin, especially with healthcare, things like that. So we have to come up first. I think it's the responsibility first of the national government to come up with a plan and somehow engage the local governments to be part of that plan, to use their new money now, to be part of that plan. So it's still up in there, it's still quite volatile. And it started with the devolved functions of the agri. Now that's a typical example of a mistake, I think, because the devolution of the agricultural sector to the local governments immediately fractured the entire agricultural system, because everyone is doing their own thing. And I know governors and city mayors who have absolutely no interest in agri. Absolutely no interest. They didn't spend 1 centavo in agri, except for the 20% development fund, meron silang konting development. Pero hindi, so ngayon, walang magawang plano national. Kaya yung food supply natin nagkakaproblema. Because before we can say, in Isabela, we can count on how many tons of rice coming out this year, how many tons of pork products, how much fish, how much of this, how much of that. O kayo, ganito. We can make an overall plan. And we will say, sige, ito yung maaasahan natin, tulungan natin ito para dumami ang kanilang ani, yung productivity rito, pagandahin natin, and you can make an overall plan. So that's what we have to do, not only with agri. I think agri should be centralized again. But what we were hoping, what we were trying to do with agri is we should do with the other parts of the government. One of the complaints that we had in local government has always been national government keeps giving additional functions to the local government, but we have no extra item, we have no extra funding, we have no training. You know, you're going to ask somebody to be housing, just the land use plan. How many local governments actually have the capability of putting together a sensible land use plan? They will make something, but it does, it's not the actual, hindi yun ang nasusunod when it comes to the local development. So we have to put that all together. Now with the Mandanas ruling, we have the funds to do it. And hopefully it will align with what the national plan is. But to make it align with the national plan, there has to be a national plan. And thus far we haven't had one. So that's what we have to do first. If the windfall of the Mandanas ruling is going to be of any advantage, not only to the locals but also to the national government, we have to have a plan. We always have to have a plan. When we first talked about this with Jesse Robredo, because I was local government, with Jesse Robredo and the local Mandanas, the original concept was that, well, it started really when Sani Osmeña tried to hold up the payments of IRA because daw ang daming utang namin ng national government. So the ULAP, we filed the case and won it. That makes IRA a automatic appropriation. Hindi na ginagalaw. And that's the status now. But when we started examining that, it came to the point where we say, mali yung calculation ng IRA. Because kung mapasahin ng local government goes, the percentage of national collections, which includes customs, VAT, all of this, which was interpreted as not being part of the national collections. And that's why that whole case started. But then we were talking, what will we do? Kung manalo tayo rito, anong gagawin natin sa additional na funding? The original concept was that first assistance to those local governments that are having difficulty supporting their health system. Because pag devolved ng health, my example, Ilocos Norte, may mga sikat kami kasi presidente yung tiga-amin yung presidente, dami namin ospital. Nung dinevolve, hindi na kayang bayaran ng local government yung sweldo ng mga nagtatrabaho sa ospital. Because for one, we didn't have a budget for it. And secondly, there was a big discrepancy between the pay grade of the local health workers and those who were in the national. Yung sa local, siguro, pay grade lang, mga 21, 22 sila, 26, 27, 20. Kaya hirap talaga kami. So we said, let's assist first those of the local government that are having a hard time supporting or funding their healthcare system in the province. Secondly, we were going to provide assistance to the 4th, 5th, 6th class LGUs. Because they're in a, hindi sila makaahon dun sa kanilang economic strata. So that was the original concept. So maybe we can come up with some kind of similar plan again, so that the additional funds will go to specific purposes that can be mandated by national government. I don't know that functions should be devolved again. I think we should continue with the national government, but let local government with their new money play a bigger part in that plan. But I think the big problem is there's no plan, and has not been a plan for a long time. So that's what we need to do first. That we have to come up with an idea of how we are going to spend this money. What do we want to get out of this new money for the local government? What part now will they play in vis-a-vis the national government? Until we decide all of those things, then I'm afraid that money will go, we don't know where it will go. It will be good for the locals because siyempre yung mga concerns nila will be attended to kasi may pera na sila. But in the national context, we'll not really be moving forward because everybody is going in their own direction. So once again, we have to go back and have a good idea. What are we trying to achieve? That's where vision comes in. What do we want the Philippines to look like in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15, 20, 30 years? I always remind people, look at China. What is tayo dito? Short term. Ang short term natin, a year and a half. Ang medium term natin, maybe what, 5, 10 years? Ang China, ang medium term nila, 50 years. Ang long term nila is 100 plus years. I know it's hard to do if you're not an authoritarian government, but it just goes to show that we have to be thinking in those terms, in the long term, which brings us to the problems in our political system. The term limits, the 3 years, all of those things come into play.
Babalik lang ako sa kasi you're very passionate about agriculture and they must be included among the private and public investment. Itong sinasabi nyo, kung walang plan, tapos ang pera nandun lang, nakatapon, would you agree that one of the most important things that the national government should look at is food security? Kasi if Governor A only thinks of, I will keep producing this, tapos naulit-ulit yung pandemic scenario and nobody wants to provide this kind of essential food to this other province.
Yeah.
How, from the point of view of the national government, how do you think can that be? So,
by having a plan.
yung food security.
By having a plan. That's the main thing, is you have to have a plan. And the state will have to direct that where these investments, call it the savings investments of the national government, will go, so that it adds to what we are trying to achieve at the national level. So mag-coordinate yan. Oo nga, hindi lang kasi you cannot blame the locals. Dito tayo kumikita Dito tayo, palakihin natin yan. Dito maganda dito meron tayong advantage dyan dahil meron tayong whatever, may asset tayo na wala sila. Doon saan talaga sila pupunta. So there's nothing that you cannot, it's not surprising that that's what happens.
But in case of a crisis, how do you make sure that they can complement each other or provide each other? Parang may complementarity sila.
I'm very wary of mandated appropriations, especially at the local level, to direct the. But we may have to do something, some mild version of that, because if there's one thing that we chafe at in local government, the national government keeps telling us what to do when you do not know the situation, local situation. Tinuturuan nyo kami kung ano yung gagawin, hindi pa kayo nakapunta rito, hindi nyo pa nakita yung sitwasyon dito. So again, that coordination has to be, because every local government has all local governments have common problems, but every local government has specific problems. That has to be attended to. Siyempre, hindi lang yung national concerns ang dapat ginagawa ng local government, kaya nga local government, because they take care of the local situation.
Mr. President, before you answer the last question, uminom muna kayo.
Okay lang.
Ano ko sir, last na ba?
Last na ba yun?
Last na yun?
Lang namin. Hindi mo ko paghabaw. Depende kay sir.
Pwede mag-extend si sir.
Ako may tanong din ako.
Yung health, hindi pa natin.
Hindi ba naman tayo? Anytime we can invite the good president. J-Mark, ikaw lang din nagsasalita.
Ikaw pa na.
Ako, gusto ko lang po sana susugan yung tungkol doon sa foreign relations kasi matagal na sinusulong ng China yung joint exploration sa West Philippine Sea. Ano po ang stand nyo rito?
I think that's actually, I view it as an opportunity. Yung Malampaya patapos na, di ba?
Yes, sir.
So we need more exploration, and with the problems, the political problems that we have with the conflicting claims with China, essentially, and even ASEAN. Meron din tayong conflicting claims sa mga ibang bansa sa ASEAN. Para maumpisahan na mag-joint po na tayo. Joint exploration man lang. Besides, we need everybody's their help because it costs a great deal of money to do that exploration. So hindi kaya ng gobyerno na even the big corporations, they cannot do it by themselves. They have to do it in partnership with other groups, foreign groups. And again, that public-private partnership concept will be something that we should take advantage of. So I think since Malampaya is clearly on another 2-3 years, maybe 5 at the most, then it's time to start the exploration because yung energy is going to be a very big problem again. If we are hoping to increase the development, especially in the industrial side, in the manufacturing side, all of these elements have to come together. So I think until we can reclaim everything that we have lost in terms of territory, then I think we have to live with the fact that if we are going to start the exploration, we will have to do the exploration as a joint effort with ASEAN, with China, with all the stakeholders in the West Philippine Sea.
Gusto ko lang po kunin din yung side nyo tungkol dun sa matagal ng issue nung time pa ng father nyo in terms of Sabah. May plano rin po ba kayo na buhayin muli yung issue ng pag-claim ng Pilipinas sa Sabah, given the fact na meron namang mga supporting evidences ng Pilipinas na hinahawakan na ang Sabah ay talagang naging bahagi ng teritoryo ng Pilipinas?
Hindi naman kailangan i-revitalize in the sense that buhay palagi. Even in the baselines agreement, we insisted na nandiyan pa rin yung claim sa Sabah. Hindi namin tinatanggal. So that has always been existing. But how do you now what we need to do is we have to, syempre, that's also why Malaysia becomes a party in interest in all the things that are happening in Mindanao because of the Sabah issue. So that claim still remains. The Malaysian government makes very sure that pag dumadami na ang Pilipino sa Sabah, pinapalis na naman nila. Kasi pagka magkaroon ng ano doon, pagka nagkabutuhan doon, mas marami yung Pilipino, makukuha talaga natin yung Sabah. So maybe that's one way of doing it, to make sure that our claim is backed up by local conditions. But you know, once again, I do not see Malaysia giving it up willingly. Maybe we will have to go again to we will have to go to court again. And but I think the issues in Sabah are very clear. The issue, Sabah was given to the Sultan of Sulu by the Sultan of Brunei as a present because the Sultan of Sulu helped the Sultan of Brunei fight an uprising in Brunei. So binigay sa Pilipinas. The Philippines then leased it to an English person who for nothing, for I don't know what the price is, but it's for a pittance, which they are continuing to pay actually. But when the Brits left, created Malaya, sinama nila yung the precursor of Malaysia. When they created the country, sinama nila as territory ng Malaysia yung Sabah, which is where the problem arose, because it was never the property of Malaysia. It was never the property. It was the property of the Sultan of Sulu, and therefore part of the Philippines. So that is something that we have to pursue. But I think, considering the global situation now, we will have to just maintain that because we are really right now at a standoff legally, geopolitically with Malaysia when it comes to that. Again, that's why Malaysia has always become a party of interest in the goings on, which is why I was very, very surprised when the Bangsamoro Basic Law was, and that the moderator was going to be Malaysia. That was the part that we could not understand. How is the party in interest going to moderate between itself and the Philippines? That's why if you saw the Bangsamoro design, the design of the original design of Noy of the Bangsamoro, it was directly taken from the Malaysian political system. Konti na lang, pwede nang isama eh. Konti na lang. Wala nang aayusin sa Bangsamoro. Sa Bangsamoro na you could immediately transplant it into the Malaysian political system, which I thought was a really
And
big
they were
thing.
even blaming you. That's why that law was not passed because of you, Buno.
That's not true. That's
Hindi, alam po namin yun.
I reported a substitute bill,
Yes.
which took yan ang naging Bangsamoro ngayon.
Yes.
Yun yung ginamit nila ngayon. And walang problema.
Extensively that's being in the editorial of Tribune right now. They're writing about that. Anyway, again, salamat, hindi na pwedeng next kasi otherwise pagbibigyan ko lahat. Abutin tayo alas 5. Hindi naman lahat matira sila, di ha?
Marami talaga tayong pag-uusapan. There's a lot of
extensive po yung ano nyo.
that need to be attended to. That's why a large part of really the job of the next administration is to have a plan, prioritize talaga. Kasi hindi natin pwedeng gawing sabay-sabay. We have to prioritize.
Ito, on behalf of their group, salamat po, binigyan nyo kaming oras. Again po, kung makakapagsilbi kami sa inyo, especially this coming handa na po ba kayo sa this campaign?
Oo.
Okay, very good.
Inumpisa na namin, natigil lang dahil dito sa Omicron.
Kung makakapagsilbi po, sabihin nyo lang.
Sige, thank you very much.
Maraming salamat.
Thank you. I know that this is only a small percentage of what we need to discuss.
Opo.
But,
We have more. Yeah.
talagang marami talagang
Marami.
Pero talagang the more I study all of these things, there's people say we have to dig ourselves out of this hole. This I see it also in a different way. It's also an opportunity because yung mga ayaw natin sa dating sistema, this is our chance maybe to remake it in the way that we want.
Parang reboot.
Yeah, so it's not maybe a clean sheet, but it's half clean. So marami tayong pwedeng baguhin. So maybe this is our opportunity to put a silver lining on what has happened with COVID. That we can reinvent many of the areas. And again, we have to understand what our priorities are, because we have limited resources. The countries that we used to depend on for help are also in trouble. So hindi natin sila maasahan. So maybe the private side, our big businessmen assure me that if kung tama ang patakbo, kung maganda ang maging maayos ang the money will the capital investment will come in. So maybe that's what we have to fix first. So these are the things.
Salamat po. Can we have a picture po?
Yes, of
Ito kayo
course.
sa ano?
Oh.
Dito na po.
Yeah, ako na.